Welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love. To find out what gives them their I'm your host, Joshua Boris. All right, that's enough. The mask is so sweaty to breathe into. Joined as always by my kind of disco-y, funky, jumpsuited, deformed hockey mask goalie and friend,
Alex Dandino.
Woo! I love a good coming in hot prop intro. Woo! You can see that on the Nerd Alchemist.
I wonder what movie we're talking about today.
Yeah! Nerd Alchemist, plural, S at the end on YouTube. You can see my hilarious prop intro comedy. I'm kind of the carrot top of podcast comedies. Here we go. Today, the birth of an icon, Alex. Friday the 13th, Part 3. D, if you're like me and lucky. Alex, we've been through 2 Fridays before. This is where we break everything the other Fridays had built to create a new god. What are your takes? Hit me with your initial thoughts on Friday the 13th 3.
To me, Friday the 13th Part 3D obviously gives us the iconic hockey mask. It gives us the look that we're all familiar with.
Let's pause that. What about this just clicked? What about this new Jason? Bigger, stronger, more focused, less human mask. What is it about that all worked?
It gives us this mask that I think we're all familiar with. We all know what a hockey mask looks like. I think, though, it's the holes. I don't know how to describe this properly, but I'm going to go with this.
I like the holes with Shia LaBeouf.
No, the holes in the hockey mask. Like, first off, it's now officially the first time we've seen both his eyes in a mask.
You can look so you can be afraid while you tell me.
Well, also, I mean, Griffey, you did it at the top of the show. I mean, it itself is very difficult to breathe in those. So you have to imagine, like, now when we hear the it actually is like, well, maybe he's just breathing, and that's how he has to breathe through these holes. But I honestly think
just like, instead of kill mommy, he's like, I would kill for oxygen.
I think the hockey mask is so readily found. Like, when I think about, like, obviously, I mean, Michael Myers is a great example. That Michael Myers mask is a worn-out William Shatner mask.
Yeah.
Kind of difficult to find, though. Like, as far as that kind of goes. Like, that wasn't like a readily found mask in a previous life or anything. The hockey mask is easy to find, so what's scary about it is Jason could be anybody. That's what's scary about it.
I think that's the point I hit on, right? Because there's the obvious imagery of maybe he's just blocking the nets of heaven, right? And murdering you to hell. Really corny thing that I spent a lot of time writing on this, like, and I was like, wow, Griff, you're really just like living in your own.
So glad you didn't start with that.
Even though I just said it out loud, so welcome to my butthole. This is where we live. But what I thought it was is I think it's the lifelessness of it, right? As you were saying.
Yeah.
Even the burlap sack, which, you know, most people have some chagrin for the burlap sack. The way they deploy the burlap sack actually is very humanizing, right? We can project a lot of emotion and sympathy and humanity onto that sack. The hockey mask gives us none of that. The weirdest part of the hockey mask to me, besides it does just look cool, right? It's a visual that works. Who knows why? But it does turn Jason now into this faceless killing automaton. The weirdest part of the origin of the hockey mask is how he gets it. Shelly, Todd Phillips' favorite character of all time, he uses the hockey mask in a prank.
Right.
But a weird scuba prank. So Shelly in his box, or his whole world as he calls it, has an entire scuba suit and a working harpoon gun, but not the breathing apparatus. Why is he scuba underwater in a hockey mask? And that's what gets it to Jason. It's one of those things that it feels like they must have had a scuba mask and been like, well, that sucks. We don't want to see Jason in a scuba mask. They're like, what's like a mask? It feels like maybe this is my question to you. Is this one of those happy accidents? Do you think this was the whole idea was just we need some kind of mask and they just shoehorned this in and it just happened to be pure magic, like a lightning bolt from the heavens?
I think as it comes with all great stuff. Like I've read about this actually. I actually read I read the Wikipedia article about how this mask came to light, and it actually originally was during a lighting check.
Really?
That's sort of like the main thing. Yeah. It says the story on Wikipedia is that the decision to dress Jason Voorhees, and I'm quoting, in his now signature hockey mask occurred during a lighting check on set. The film's 3D effects supervisor was a hockey fan and supplied a Detroit Red Wings goaltender mask.
I've heard that part, yeah. It was his mask, but I didn't know. So this isn't something they had written in. Like, this wasn't an important part of what they did.
No.
Happy
this
accident.
was like, yeah, happy accident for sure. But they also had to remake the mask because the original mask was too small. So they actually had to like mold it to his face.
Well, yeah, and this was the birth of the gigantic Jason now. Jason now
and
is
they also
enormous.
Also, those the red triangles were added for effect.
I love the red. God, it's one of those things, and this just happens, right? Like holding this in my hand right here, looking at it. There's just so much happening in my brain when you see it.
I think
it's fascinating to me when something so simple, like you said, it's just a household thing. This hockey fan just happened to have one nearby. Now look at the fucking totem this has become and what this means and represents in our world.
I think it's the fear of hollowness, I think, is what's really at the heart of it. Like when you look into that hockey mask, you see through it. The fear comes from the fact that you can ascribe any fear you have to what's behind that mask. That's really kind of like what's significant about great horror totems is that you can really, really, really give them their own power. Like that's the important thing about horror totems. They have their own power. Just like Freddy, a fedora wasn't scary until fucking Freddy put it on.
I still think I owned a fedora, man. I felt really bad about myself. I went to a UFC fight once, and I actually had a fedora bet with another guy. I think it was the darkest chapter of my life. It was really bad. It was in my 20s. I was drinking a lot of time. You guys can hit me up on the Film Alchemist DMs to ask about the fedora story if you ever want it. I'm sure I've told it on one of our 8 million podcasts we do. Yeah, I think it's the facelessness, right? And this is something that I've noticed in all of the Friday the 13th, right? And I don't want to spend a lot of time just taking shots at the 3D, right? It was a gimmick. It was used as a marketing trick. I don't think the 3D adds any value to the movie other than maybe 2 kills, which are really fun. But this is the thing. I feel like what this movie suffers from, because it's so funny, because I've always had this really high on my list. On this viewing, I have to knock part 3 down a hair, right? Other than the iconography of Jason and him getting his mask, and I think Shelly's one of the best characters we've had in a Friday movie. I think, and the kills are fucking spectacular in this movie. This is where we turn to now Jason becomes murder porn, where we're just more excited to see how he dispatches teens than, actually doing a story.
Right. This is now rooting for the villain, which I think is a really important thing about any horror franchise. The 3 main ones are obviously Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and Jason. I think Michael Myers, most Michael Myers movies for me, I'm still rooting for people to survive. Except once we get into the 2000s, I'm like, oh, kill those fuckers.
No, when he fought Busta Rhymes, I've never felt more love and endearment towards a character. Yeah,
exactly. I think that, but that's the thing, we're starting to careen into the territory of now I want to see what he's going to do to these kids.
Yeah.
Because this really has this kind of haunted house effect, because basically it's just a lake house thing, which is cool, and I like that. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
We're getting more into what we talked about with the first one, which is the POV stuff, which is pretty much absent from this movie.
One shot. But I really paid attention. There's one POV, and it's only used for a cheat, right? They use it to trick the main girl. I forget her name in this movie. They use it as a trick. Her boyfriend is the POV. And when she comes in, he scares her. And it's immediately letting you know that is done. Right? And I think, honestly, that hurts this film. Because I think one of the brilliance we talked about in the first 2 is the extra psychological character work that is happening with that POV. I think it's a really important thing that this series begins to lose at this phase.
It is, because we're now getting into the, hey, he's about to just do these awesome kills, like, get ready. And I mean, this is also like, not only is he now in the hockey mask, but he's also mainly carrying around the machete and finding all these other like crazy things to kill people with. So like in the originals, it was a knife. Like, it was a knife with Pamela Voorhees.
There was
and
some,
then later
there
on
was some things, arrows and whatever.
Sure, like there was some, I'm not saying
Pamela
that,
Voorhees
again,
definitely had a Rambo training montage for sure.
Again, the Voorhees definitely are the Banksy of the horror world, for like their awesome, their very awesome displays. But like,
is that a Banksy? No, it's a Voorhees, much more rare.
No, it's a Voorhees. Come on,
you can tell by the red palettes.
Yeah, we're much more in this system of, and again, like, it's interesting because we talk about this with a lot of like movies now, like especially probably around the time of Avatar, when the first Avatar came out, which now is like 10 years ago. All of a sudden, every movie came out in 3D. Every movie had to be 3D. Every movie was coming out. Oh, you can see it in 3D if you want. It always is kind of a gimmick, and it always works that way. And like, there's really, other than honestly James Cameron, no one has really championed it as anything other than that. Like, but what I love about the way this happens in Friday the 13th 3D is I like the gimmick. Like, the gimmick for me works here because they know it's a gimmick. Like, that spear gun thing, that is like...
Right. There are two moments that it works spectacularly. It's the spear gun and the eyeballs exploding out of the face. Those are great.
Oh my God, yes.
But that's what I mean. Most of it is, oh, I better pick up this laundry line, and they're just pointing a stick at you. Right. Oh, we're juggling. And it's like, come on, guys. Like, use it for the murders, I get. But, neither here nor there. I don't care that much about the 3D, but the loss of POV is what right. I'm not worried about seeing things in 3D. I'm worried that the movie becomes a little 2-dimensional without my POV.
Very nice.
You're welcome.
No, you're right though. Like,
you're welcome.
I think when we're starting to take away what I think are great narrative devices, and then we're not only using them for a fake out, but also just taking them away entirely, I think that's when we're in a situation where these movies start to become more about formula and more about, let's not push the envelope as much as we had. Like, the one thing that this movie has going for it still actually is, again, the final girl, Chris. They always seem to figure out the final girl. Like, these first two, for me, are the ones where the final girl is very important and also very interesting and very worth noting. Like, obviously, Jenny's my favorite. Jenny was into psychiatry, so she wanted to trick Jason, like play Jason at his own game, This one is interesting, and I was reading a little more about it in that Chris has suffered some sort of childhood trauma or some sort of sexual assault trauma.
Right.
So, like, that makes her prone to less intimate interactions and so on and so forth. So, like, her vulnerability by rules of horror is much lower, which makes her a much more interesting final girl and a much more interesting person to focus on.
Let me ask you this, because that's a big question in the movie, is Chris's nightmare, right? I'll never forget that face. Jason is in the woods, drags her out, and then she just wakes up in her own bed.
Right.
Was that actually Jason? Did she actually have a meeting with Jason? Obviously, yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is obviously not. I mean,
the way that it...
Because they were out there, right, after a date with the guy, right?
Right.
Who's obviously not very supportive of her trouble. Because I think early he's like, let's fuck. She's like, no. He's like, I can only take so many cold showers. And it's like, piece of shit.
No, I mean, I really think that this is her interpretation of the trauma, Like, this is our way of...
Bev and her dad thing, right?
Yeah.
Are you still my little girl?
Well, yeah. I mean, like, to me, there's a lot
the extra part, though?
There's a lot of that.
Let me run this by you. The extra part that kind of set me off on, dude, did her dad assault her and this and that? Was she said, this was the first time my mom ever struck me. Right? Is this the mom being just a terrible parent and you have seduced your father, my husband? These kind of things get really messy and
I mean,
sickening.
That's like sort of the inversion of Jason. Like, Chris does not have a great relationship with her mother, and Chris's relationship with her mother is very strained from that perspective. So, like, the inversion and the dichotomy of Chris versus Jason makes it makes her a much less vulnerable character, I think, in the eyes of what we would traditionally call horror rules. But particularly for the Friday the 13th series, because mothers play such a huge factor in how these stories work and how these stories are compelling. So I think if you look at this movie from that perspective, Part 3 is actually very interesting in that he's the first time he's against someone who maybe does not share the same value set as Jason does.
That's interesting. Yeah. Plus, she's already showed down a monster, right? This isn't her first time being a last girl, as it were.
Right.
I like that.
I think that's,
and it's hard too because I think it would be fun if they had ran that more with Jason, right? Because this one, the way they shoot it, Jason is always looming in the background of shots, seeing kids. Yeah. So we're almost setting it up as, like these baking videos my wife watches where it's like, oh, look at this fucking food. You want to eat this fucking food? You want to eat that food? Yeah. It's just a chef like making, goblin dangly cupcakes with whatever. And it's just like, ooh, yeah, you want to eat that. That's this whole movie, right? Is, we want Jason to kill that. And it loses a lot, right? There's no personal bonding with Jason anymore. And I think he suffers. And like you said, for Chris to have this really powerful backstory of abuse, right? And then her trying to cope with it in a place where it, triggers all of these old flashbacks. It would be interesting to see Jason, also a survivor of a lot of trauma, have to run parallel, right? Like the two reactions to something like that. Does it break you and, harden you into a monstrous form, or do you try to be like Chris and still stay the course?
Right. Well, this is something
Jason
we
just
talk
becomes
about.
too bland to me, man.
Well, yeah. Jason, again, like another great example. Again, the way he's shot is so specific in this movie to how we end up reacting to him. Like, God, dude, the spear gun thing is probably the best example of this. He's shot from afar. And really what they're doing is trying to like promote his size and say, look how fucking huge Jason is now. Look how huge he is with that scary mask and everything. But like, you lose that so much because you're not in his mindset. Like if I was looking down from Jason's POV and staring down that girl before I fired a spear gun into her face, I'd probably be a lot more terrified and probably be a lot more interesting to watch too. But because we're now in only the victim's frame of reference, we sort of lose this sort of like, I don't want to put it this way, but it's kind of the only way to put it, this sort of wish fulfillment that we all have as viewers is like, oh man, what if I was that powerful? Like that's what I think is lost here, and that's what makes I think Part 3 kind of a blander version of all of them, is that this like it, and it's not, again, it's not the 3D. It's the story has taken a back seat to the kills and to the character.
Right. Well, I was gonna say maybe it's what you said, but I feel almost the inverse, right? Where now this movie only becomes wish fulfillment, right? Which is now that absolutely. Jason. There's no personal bond to Jason at all, or his kind of character or struggle, right? There's no Jenny saying what's going on. All it is here are some kids doing kid stupid things, right? Let's fuck at the lake. Hey, let's go in the barn. And Jason's watching. Now we see Jason watching through windows multiple times instead of a POV looking through the window at the kids, right? So now it's, here's our fun. Here is Jason, and we're just waiting for that kill. We're not interested in why any of this is happening anymore.
Right.
And I do wonder, Friday the 13th 3 is an interesting case study in, had they not found the mask, had they not had such awesome kills, is this the movie that kind of kills us on Friday? Right? I think it's one of those, it's a little bit spins its wheels. It has some really good characters, too. This is one of the best kind of character flicks in the Friday movies to me. But if they hadn't had such lightning in a bottle with that last 30-ish minutes, right? Minus the last 15 of him versus only the girl. If they hadn't had that stretch of mask, holy shit, that's awesome. Oh, fucking murder. Oh. Like if that hadn't hit so hard, I do wonder what would have happened to this series going forward. It feels like they had kind of forsaken the things that made it great, but then they happened upon some really cool stuff that just changes the franchise.
I think what they did was they happened upon iconography, and that's what makes it that much better. So that's what helps it survive, because I really think past Jason in a hockey mask and like his official look, I think past that, you're kind of running on fumes in general with this whole thing. What I really think is fascinating is the original idea for this movie and how it was shit canned because Amy Steele didn't want to come back and be Jenny again. Because originally this was supposed to follow Jenny. And this whole thing was supposed to focus on her post-trauma and her like going to college, or her like there was another scenario of this where they had written her like in a she was like in a mental hospital, and she eventually tracks him down and they have their final confrontation. This was also supposed to be like the end of a trilogy. This was supposed to be the end of the story.
Right.
Which is why I think like that final shot of like Jason in the barn and like the lake and all that kind of shit, like that's why that whole thing is very like peaceful kind of, is that this is supposed to be the end of the Jason Voorhees story. But when you create iconography in the third fucking movie of a series, you're not going to get away with making only 3 of these. Like that just doesn't happen.
It's insane. How does it work that this is the one, right? Short of like Hellraiser 3 was very important, because that brought back Pinhead and the Hell on Earth concept. Nightmare 3 was also very important, because that brought, us to the Dream Warriors, right? Halloween 3 is not even in the same series. So part 3s are all kind of lightning rods. And honestly, my theory is that the POV disappears because of the difficulty of the 3D. Right? If you read on this movie, it's all about how fucking hard that was. And it's a weird... It's just a weird version, because it feels like it has the potentials of all of the best things of the first 3, right? I think Shelly is a wildly interesting character. Again, Todd Phillips porn, as I will call Shelly. I hate Shelly. He annoys the fuck out of me. But it's a fairly interesting extra level, because they did it in part 2 with our friend in the wheelchair. In this one, they take and they say, what if we have the kid who doesn't fit in with the group? Right? I can't go skinny dipping. I'm not skinny enough. Oh, I'll try to scare you with knives and harpoons to make you love me. There's some real moments where Shelly is going against the grain of a normal, high school, college age, fuck machine boy, which I think is really fun. I mean, Shelly has become, I would say he's probably a top 5 character in the Friday series. If you ask anyone who likes these movies about Shelly, they all remember him, right? And a lot of it's because he's elicited so much rage and hate from us. He's super annoying. And he does have the problem of, he's just like, well, you're a girl, I'm a boy, we're entitled to fuck. Let's go. I juggled for you. Come on. It's not the best. It's not the best. But I do think Shelly's journey is fun. Like Shelly and the bikers, that keeps me interested enough while the movie is somewhat lagging, right? That part's really important.
Yeah, no, look, the biker kills are fun. Like, again, it's like it starts getting into sort of just this prop stuff, like where we're just at the point where it's like, well, how cool can we make this look? And that happens in this movie. They keep trying to almost implant what I think is probably like the Jenny effect with Chris's stuff into this movie. But it just gets takes such a back seat that I kind of just like all of it sort of bleeds together for me. Like, look, not to say that some of these kills are not awesome. Like Andy getting fucking bisected, like literally getting chopped in half is fucking hilarious. Like, dude, that is some funny shit.
That is one of my all-time favorite Friday kills, because again, it does what Friday does perfectly. You've given him a quirk. We've seen him hand walk a bunch of times. It's when he looks up and Jason cuts him in half, it's a brilliant use of that character's trait to forge creativity and how Jason again, it's a simple kill. It's a slash kill,
it's
right?
A simple
but it becomes
kill.
So much more memorable because of how he slashes him, right? Not how he slashes, but how the victim prepares himself for slashing.
Again, where it's the same as the spear kill in part 2. Like it's using the thing it's using the thing they like
it's
against
the wheelchair rolling down the stairs. It's just brilliant.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
It's amazing.
And
it's
then the cutaway when he's above the hammock. Oh, when his corpse is up above the hammock, I had to pause that and just stare at that frame to be like, what am I looking at? There are parts everywhere. I need to see this. It's awesome. That one is really... Dude, but that's what I mean. This movie has really good kills.
That hammock is
and
amazing.
It has
that hammock kill is so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
no,
that's what I
The
think.
hippie kill, not my favorite. I'm trying to think of what the best kills were. The eyeballs popping out is number 1.
Yeah, that's definitely my favorite.
Squeezing
like that's
the head
like also one of those things
eyeballs
where...
exploding out. That's number 1. Handstand number 2. Harpoon to the eye number 3.
Spear gun number 3.
You know what really was unsettling to me that bothered me? Was when he's just clubbing the black biker to death. Which happens twice. Because he's clubbing the shit out of this guy at the start, and you're like, oh, God, that's brutal. His brains are being smashed. And it just sits on him, right? It just sits on him. And it's so simple. It's like he doesn't even think twice about it, right?
Yeah.
And then later, the guy has apparently been alive and doesn't flee. He's just like, I'm going to wait for my chance. And picks the worst moment to attack and rage Jason and gets his head beat in again. Twice. Oh, that one got me. Those are kind of my top kills. Here's an interesting moment for you. Why did they not show Shelly's kill on screen? They decide to give us that he shows up with his throat slashed, and it's the little boy who cried suicide thing, right? They're like, oh, no one believes Shelly's dead, in the stoner cabin. Not that those two would be the most intensive, anywho.
Well, that's
But is that as good? I mean, come on. Of all the horror movie characters you want to see get it, I think Shelly's got to be in.
I mean, yeah, Shelly's in, but I think it's the gag of it's the gag of crying wolf. Like, that's the reason not to do it, honestly. Like, from a storytelling standpoint, you've already done it once, so you want to, like, actually trick people this time. Like,
But, I mean, it's not used to a good effect because he's already in the cabin murdering Cheech downstairs, right, with electricity.
Sure.
So there's not even a chance for them to catch the warning of Shelly and be like, I should ignore this to his own peril, right?
Did you call him Cheech?
Yeah. Stoner boy, right? I love the introduction of those guys, too, where it's like, our van is on fire! And it's like, not that I'm the world's greatest stoner, right? But I was like, That's a fuckload of marijuana smoke for the 3 minutes we haven't been in that van.
Worst stoners ever. But yeah,
I mean, it's like, were they in the van already? Did they just crawl in the van? There's a lot of questions I have at this moment.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think what part 3 suffers from is that they had to rewrite the entire thing, and they had to redo. Well, the reason it survives though is because it shifts the focus entirely to you're rooting against the people that are trying to survive this movie. Like, that is like really like the first time in a movie I remember doing that. Like, this is, I think I saw this when I was like, this is one of those like great, like when AMC used to just like do horror movies all through the month of October. This is one of those ones I just caught like really late at night. This is one of the first times I think really probably, and you think about it, in 1982, you probably were rooting for Jason because like there's also very little Pamela Voorhees going on here. This might be one of the first times.
That's what I mean. We're all the way pulled out of Jason in this movie.
We're so gone from Jason.
What they did is they gave us bikers who we don't like, right? They're kind of mugging him. When Shelly runs over the bike, that's the only moment of decency from him in the whole movie, we feel like. But then the bikers show up to siphon gas. That's their revenge, and I promise no one will get hurt. So there's an extra layer of what's going on with them, but not enough to make us sad when they start getting murdered, right?
Right.
So the bikers are bad. Shelly's bad. The rest of them, they're just kind of there. They're like bland, let's have sex. The boyfriend who gets his eyeballs popped out is just trying to encourage his traumatized girlfriend to fuck more because he hates cold showers. Yeah. So
again, we're all like...
There's no decency in these people.
There's no decency.
This was the shift, right? What if Jason becomes front and center, and it necessarily changes the way we interact with these movies? Because there's no more I have to sit in my brain and be like, all right, so I'm a mother of a grieving child looking through a window at teenagers who have nothing to do with it, living a happy life. What is happening in Mrs. Voorhees' head that it's time to slaughter? Right? Same with Jason. Like, that could have been me. I could be that age. They took me. They took my mom. There's things that you have to ponder as an audience. Now we're like, no, you don't. Right? And it's interesting. The one thing we forgot to talk about. I love the cold open of this movie too.
Oh, it's great.
The sad convenience store clerk.
Yeah.
This guy, I feel so bad for him, right?
This poor guy. Like,
one, he deserves his death, obviously, right? Because there are two things he deserves his
death.
He did? Of course he deserves it.
Yeah,
one,
you're right.
He's
Sorry.
letting rabbits eat the fucking produce, doesn't take the produce out. He
Very
drinks out of the
you're
bottle. Right. He eats the donuts. So either he has no customers or the customers he doesn't care giving them disease. You feel bad because his wife comes out. She's like, you fat fuck, stop eating all the food. And he's just like, all right. You're like, wow, this guy's a very browbeaten, sad man. His existence is pretty bad. The scene we cut to, though, is he gets scared by a snake that's murdered all of his bunny friends, right? So scared he has to go take just a loose bathroom. Disgusting spray sound effects, right? Doesn't flush, doesn't wipe, gets up to investigate the sound. So I was like, this guy is such a mess, such a slovenly mess. It's the first time in the Friday series that I was like, I think his death is a mercy. The first time in 3 movies, I was like, this guy's better off.
Movies, like, this guy deserves it.
Yeah.
He hasn't done anything wrong. He just deserves deserves a glorious death for us all to watch.
He's on the toilet, and they put so many bad loose bathroom sound effects in. He's drinking whiskey on the shitter, right? Doesn't wipe, pulls up his underwear, walks about. This guy is so beaten in life. He's not even concerned at all with anything going on around him. I was just like, you know what, dude? Your time has come. What is the trajectory of that guy's life, right?
Terrible.
He just lives long enough to become his own Jason Voorhees, right? He saw a snake kill his bunnies, and now he becomes a murderer.
Jason mercy killed. That is the first mercy kill in this entire series.
I was an all-the-way mercy kill, man. Yeah, I think that's the funny thing, right? Because I love the opening. I really liked Shelly. Again, I hate Shelly, but you love to hate him. It's an interesting look. The showdown with the bikers was kind of some fun and games, but the rest of the teenage cast essentially disappears. Jason erupts in the hockey mask, and your lizard brain reacts. Right. We get some awesome murders. The final showdown with him and Chris. It's funny because, again, Friday is helping develop so many of these tropes that are now boring to us. But the van running out of gas, as it's going through, I just found myself super bored for the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's the one where I'm like, it's one of those ones where I'm just like, I have no reason to watch. Like, I'm sitting there at the end, like, and again, I'm sitting there and I should be like totally invested in Chris, who's like had this horrible trauma in her life, but I'm like, can she just do this and we can be done with it? Like, God damn.
Also, you're like,
why?
Chris, can you just run instead of waiting to hit him in the back of the head 5 times?
Yeah,
just
get the fuck out of there.
It doesn't make sense. Like, why she thinks she just keeps doing it. It's like 5 times. The one thing they snuck in on this ending that I adored was I liked that she climbed up in the rafters, and our only true POV shot is Chris surveying Jason. Right?
Yes.
And this is, now that Jason's front and center, we've seen him as a killing machine. This is a moment of watching the psychological shift of Jason. When he's searching for her in the barn, it's so madcap and destructive.
Yeah.
That it changes now to where, instead of it's this kind of shadowy killer thing, we spend what feels like 2 to 3 minutes just watching Jason in this animalistic frenzy. And it's super bright, shockingly well lit, above feed, so Jason looks kind of small and almost, under glass, as it were. It's a really cool shot that then ends in her like, death from above, and just does like a drop kick on his ass, which is just awful. Just awful. Yeah. And then she hits him with a log or a shovel, nooses his ass. But that leads us to the cool Jason lifting himself off the noose.
Yeah.
But again, it gets into this, if he can lift himself off a noose, why did the axe do it? It just starts to get a little loose at the end for me.
It's a little cartoony.
Because it's one of those things that you don't like in a horror movie, especially where they haven't done the work to really make me care much about the killer or the final girl, to where I'm like, I literally just looked on my display on my Blu-ray, and you're like, well, all right, we got 15 minutes. Guess we got to fight a little bit,
Right.
That was it. I just found myself way uninterested. And then, of course, they do their Return of the King ending again.
Have to do it.
And this time it was Mrs. Voorhees' corpse jumping out of the water, which looked super cool. But I was kind of like, what purpose is this serving? We do know that Jason can come back as a zombie. Right. But it's one of those, while the first 2 final images they had before the false ending were fantastic and stunning, this one felt like, now we're just doing things. Now we're just... And then it ends on Chris kind of driving away. Or Or like, oh, all right, she's crazy pants and Jason's dead in the barn. It just falls a little flat at the end.
Doesn't do it for me.
Which is so funny because I've always held this as one of the top 2 or 3 Fridays for me. On this viewing, I have to knock it down. I don't think it makes my top half anymore.
It just doesn't. It doesn't have the same. There's not a lot going on beside. Again, I really think taking it out of Jason's hands and making him the focal point from a viewer perspective is what changes this dramatically.
Right, and as we see by part 4, right? Part 4 is one of my favorites for sure. And the later, after 4, you know, kind of like in the 5, 6, especially through 9, now we're in Jason as this supernatural ghoul version, right? It's almost a different series in a way. But what they realized, too, is after this one, they struck gold with the iconography and Jason being front and center. Those are the movies they want to make now. And we love those movies, and they're super fun. But what I think in the transition of part 3 is, if you want to do that, Jason must be more omnipresent and vicious, right? It feels like they're still stuck between the 2 series, which is, we're not in his head, but we are going to give you some old over the shoulders. But it's just that little extra 5 feet back changes the entire way we view these murders, right? It's so much less interesting and personal. This movie almost has like a 70s made-for-TV horror feel to me, which is funny. But then by part 4, they're like, now we know what we want, which is badass murder Jason. And it felt like that's when they really hit the stride of what the series went on to. So I think to me, this movie has really good characters, if not all the way utilized. It has really good kills, right? This is the template now where they're like, those kills are awesome. Let's do that all the time, which I'm thankful for. And again, they happened onto this thing that we just could not resist. I do wonder where this series goes without the hockey mask.
Oh, I think it dies on the vine, man.
It feels like it would have been on its way out to me.
Definitely. And
I think we look back fondly because once we got the hockey mask and the fun kills, because it's hard to separate yourself now from the first time watching these, right? Going back now, I'm like, look, it's my first Jason and the kills are good. You don't care as much about what the rest of the movie's doing. But on a first viewing, I do feel like this one, had they not gotten to the mask, because they even take it off of him at the end. They go back to the deformed face, which is, it's weird that is so unimpactful.
Yeah.
You know, I think this is the kind of in-between movie. I was surprised that I had to drop it down my rankings after this viewing.
It's not as good. Not as good.
But again, like pizza or donuts, man, every Friday the 13th movie is still pretty awesome. You know, that's what I like about these. No, that's what I like about this, right? Even the piece of pizza that's been in like your local gas station too long, if you eat it, you're not going to go, bleh, gross. You're just like, that's a little bit less good version of pizza, and crush the rest of it, which I've done 100 times.
Exactly.
And that's how I think of this one, man. You know, I'm just glad to have Jason in my life, man. I'm glad that my kids wear this mask around. Just look at this thing. Look at this and do the work of writing in your mind. That's it, guys, for Friday the 13th Part 3. You guys will not be hearing Alex talk Friday the 13th again until Freddy versus Jason, which I know we are revved up for.
Yes.
Fucking revved up. I don't remember. You're not able to do The Lighthouse, but you will do Parasite. So you guys will have more Alex in your life. I'm not sure what the order is, but ignore everything I'm saying. If you like the pod, leave us a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcast app. Share us on your socials, guys. Let us know any movie, no rules, no themes, that you would like to hear in December as we stuff your stockings. I got it right the first time ever. Next month, the pod breaks bread. Some really fun movies that involve dinner parties. As always, thanks for listening, guys. For the Film Alchemist, I'm Josh Griffey.
I'm Alex Dandino.
Being an asshole's better than being a nothing. Says the worst life advice from the worst adjusted human being ever in a movie.
God bless you, sir.